move on. Okay, well, guess what? They can't ask you to move on because the legislation says so. Now, this is the Summary Offences Act 1966, Section 6. As always, go and look this information up, confirm, verify, validate it for yourselves. Now, subsection 1 says a police officer or a protective services officer on duty at a designated place may give a direction to a person or persons in a public place to leave the public place or part of the public place if the police officer or protective services officer suspects on reasonable grounds that A, the person is or persons are breaching or likely to breach the peace, or B, the person is or persons are endangering or likely to endanger the safety of another person, or C, the behaviour of the person or persons is likely to cause injury to a person or damage property, or is otherwise a risk to public safety. So this is what they rely on. However, subsection 5 clearly says this section does not apply in relation to a person who, whether in the company of other persons or not, is A, picketing a place of employment, or B, demonstrating or protesting about a particular issue, or C, speaking, bearing, or otherwise identifying with a banner, placard, or sign, or otherwise behaving in a way that is apparently intended to publicise the person's view about a particular issue. Okay, now yes, the governments will claim that a state of emergency or a state of disaster can have effects on other legislation. Yes, they can, but they can only do so when that effect and that other legislation, that other act is specified. There's nothing in the state of emergency, there's nothing in the state of disaster, okay, that says that it affects the operation of the Summary Offences Act. Okay, so if you are protesting about a particular issue, and especially if you are speaking, bearing, or otherwise identifying with a banner, placard, or sign, okay, about a particular issue, they cannot ask you to move on. Very, very important. Okay, so please, I urge you all, go and look that up. Okay, look it up, print it off, keep a copy with you, fold it up, keep it in your pocket, and have that with you. Now, I want to be very clear here, especially for everyone in Victoria. If you turn up to one of these protests and you're not wearing a mask, the police can come up and ask you for your name and address because they do have reasonable grounds to suspect that you're committing an offence because you've got no mask on. Okay, and again, under those conditions, all right, you are required to state your name and address. But of course, only do so under duress when they start to threaten you with arrest. Okay? Now, of course, if you turn up with a mask, that's going to be completely irrelevant. Now, again, if you provide your name and address under duress, and then the police go, oh, but hang on, you're more than 5 kilometres from your home, so we're going to issue you a fine for that. Say, perfect, fine, no problem, great. Hand it over. No issues. You don't want to get in fights or arguments. Challenge it down the track. Now, how do we do that? Through this Aussie Speeding Fines book. Yes, it says it's Aussie Speeding Fines, but it's all fines, okay? That 3-step process that's in Chapter 3 is a step-by-step letter process that you can use to challenge any unjust and unlawful fine. Whether it's not wearing a mask, being 5 k's from home, a speeding fine, parking fine, talking on the phone fine, failing to wear a belt, bicycle helmet fine, not having registered dogs, whatever. It's all the same thing. The process is the same. You just edit it and adjust it to suit the particular fine you've got. Now, again, even if you did nothing else, even if you didn't want to challenge it, okay, and you get the fine, just turn it over the back, just say, I want this heard in court. At the moment, especially here in Victoria, people who are electing to have cases heard in court, they're not even being listed for the first mention date, let alone trial or hearing it, first mention date until like March or April at the earliest. Okay, so there's plenty of time, okay, to successfully challenge these fines. Okay, so please, if you're worried about that, don't be. Take the fine, it's just a fancy bit of paper. And as I've said before, okay, I firmly believe that not a single one of these fines, okay, will ever see the light of day in a courtroom. In fact, I was speaking to Darren just today, and he said there was a video that was doing the rounds from, I think it was the Attorney General's office, something like that, saying they're directing the police to withdraw fines. I've already heard of a lot of fines being withdrawn as soon as people challenge them because they realise they don't have a legal leg to stand on. Okay, so just take the fine and keep going. Now, here's the important bit. they can't stop you again. They can't ask you to move on because of Section 6 of the Summary Offences Act. Okay? They can't issue you with another fine for not wearing a mask because they just gave you one. They can't issue you with another fine for being more than 5 k's from your home because they just gave you one. Again, the Infringement Act states that you can't be fined multiple times for the same offence in the same place on the same day. Okay, if you're on a road and a particular road and they set up 2 speed cameras, it's still only one offence of speeding. Okay, so make sure you're aware of this. Don't argue with them. Don't get into fights about this. Just say, no problem, if you want to give me a fine, that's fine. Fold it up, put it in your pocket, and keep doing what you're doing. Keep protesting, going about your business, whatever you need to do. Okay? So again, they can't ask you to move on. Now, of course, if you're wearing a mask, they've got no reason to ask you for anything at all. Okay? They can't ask you to move on, and they have no right to ask you for your name and address. Again, if you're not wearing a mask, they have reason to believe you're committing an offence. They can ask you, you do have to provide it. But if you're wearing a mask, they've got no other reason to believe that you're committing an offence. They can't just guess that you're more than 5 kilometres from home. Okay? So there's nothing to base that on. Now again, of course, if they keep pushing, if they keep saying, well, we're going to arrest you, whatever, great. Then under duress, provide them with that name and address. And they go, oh, look, we knew it. We knew you were more than 5 k's away. But that's fruit of the poison tree. Okay, that's like evidence obtained without a search warrant or outside the scope of a search warrant. If they didn't have the reasonable belief that you were committing offence, okay, they had no right to ask for that name and address. So again, one of the simple things that you can do, especially if you're one of our more advanced members, if the police start, standing in front of you and asking you questions that they have no right to, you just simply say, excuse me, officer, are you attempting to detain me for the purposes of facilitating an investigation contrary to the Supreme Court ruling in the matter of Regina v. Banner? Okay? Now, if you want to look all that stuff up, that's what the Know Your Rights book is all about. Okay, we've got all of those court cases. We've got all of those explanations. Okay, they're all in this book. There's links in the description to these books. Please, if you don't yet have it, go and get them. Okay, they are vitally important. They do honestly teach you all about your rights. All right. So we've covered that. Now, the other thing that I want to point out, because again, these are all the questions that are coming through, so I just want to check through that I'm answering everybody's questions. You do not have to carry identification on you. Yes, they can ask you to state your name and address. You say, fine, yes, under duress, my name is, John Smith, I live at blah, blah, blah street. That's it. They can't go, oh, where's your license to prove it? No. If you are just walking down the street, you are not required to carry a license. Okay, we're not in Nazi Germany yet. Okay, so there's no lawful requirement for you to carry identification on you. Okay, even if you're driving, and I've covered this before, if you're driving, yes, you have to produce your license, or if you don't have it on you, they can ask you to produce it to a police station within 24 hours. So you don't even need to have your license on you at the time, at any time, especially not when walking. Okay, now this brings me to another point, because I got another article just through this morning from right here in Melbourne. Now I know a lot of people have got very strong feelings towards or against cyclists. I don't want to get into that. I'll put that aside for a moment. But they were pulling cyclists over and asking them for their details and their identification to find out if they'd cycled more than 5 kilometres from home. Now they had no right to do that. Okay? You're not required to wear a mask when cycling, so they had no reason to believe that the people cycling were committing any type of offence. So they were pulling them in for no reason, no grounds. They had no authorisation, because there was no offence. They had no authorisation to ask for their name and address. And of course, as a cyclist, you're not required to carry a licence on you. So they're not required to produce that. Okay, so if you're a cyclist, if you know anyone who was a cyclist who was affected by this, please share this video around with them. If you've got access to cyclist forums or Facebook groups, whatever, pop this video up and let's get this out there, because every single cyclist who was fined should absolutely challenge those fines. They're completely unlawful.